For the debate, Mark.
Jessica Lumazuri, as ever, thank you very much indeed for that World News update. Jessica clocking off, we clock on, but of course more news throughout the evening here on France 24. Do stay with us, of course. Welcome to the France 24 debate. The people of Morocco, for the first time publicly, are questioning their king. Mohammed VI pardoned a prisoner who it later emerged was a convicted paedophile. This outraged the people of Morocco so much that there were demonstrations against the decision. These protests are continuing even now. The king has changed his mind, and that is another first. Mohammed VI rescinded the pardon. The paedophile is now in police custody in his native Spain. So in Morocco, questions are being asked. Who knew what? Who was really in charge? How did the king come to pardon the paedophile in the very first place? All this and more is coming up in our debate. You, of course, can join in too via either the debate Facebook page or on Twitter with the hashtag F24debate. So Morocco, the king, paedophile and the people. Our guests for this discussion, Michael Kirtley, the independent journalist and producer of the World Memory Film Project. Did I get that right?
You got it.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for being with us. We appreciate your presence. We also have Sonia Terab, who's a journalist and writer, author of the book. I'm sorry, that is Ida Alami we're seeing there, journalist and writer equally. Thank you for joining us. On the other side of our studio, where we will find Sonia right now, there she is, Sonia Terab, the journalist and writer, author of the book Shama Blanca. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
We have a guest joining us by Skype from Casablanca in Morocco. He is Driss Alaoui Madagri, joining us, as I say, from Casablanca, a former Minister of Communication in the Moroccan government. We'll be hearing from him very, very shortly. Let's kick off this discussion then here in the studio. And if you'll forgive me, Michael, we'll start with our two Moroccans. How are you, Sonia, and Aida, how are you both viewing this situation? Because clearly we're seeing unprecedented scenes in your home country and unprecedented criticism of your king. Go ahead.
I agree. I think there's a change in demographic and the people who have been protesting this pardon. Before, we mostly had young people going out in the streets and maybe people who have been politically engaged for a long time. And now we see people from all kinds of, from the middle class who maybe never protested before, who are really angry. Because I think it's a topic that's, people usually, feel the same about this specific topic. So I think that's why we saw all these people in the streets.
Paedophilia clearly is one of the great evils of all societies and horrific thing. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. We're starting with criticism of the king because in Morocco, Sonia, criticism of the king, it's just not done, is it? It doesn't happen.
I think it used to not happen before, but from the 20th February in 2011,
Sure.
from the start of the contestation and from the movement in Morocco. So people started to talk. That was our revolution, actually, because we didn't have huge manifestations or things, but we have an opening of the public debates and like people on Twitter, on Facebook, they started criticizing the system, even like the taxi man, people in coffee, like in the streets, in the train, everywhere. So that's what we observed, like as journalists and even citizens there. But today it's effectively most important because it's the first time that we criticize the king directly, not the system, because he is responsible of it. He's at the top of the pyramid of the decision. And for the first time, I saw like in Facebook a lot of pictures of caricatures about the king, and that is huge. I think he just lost one
aspect of his perceived all-powerful nature, I suppose.
Power,
Sure.
So he's just a human. He can make mistakes, and I think that's what is good about what's happening now. That's the first step. It's not over
Okay,
yet.
we have our first tweet of the night about that. Let me just read that to you here to sort of help move our debate along. Mohammed VI is trying to tell us that he's not responsible for his decisions. That's the first tweet on the issue coming through there. I mean, basically, I suppose that's what it's about, isn't it? People in Morocco look at the king as the person who makes the decisions, who imposes the laws, makes the laws.
And they're still waiting for him to apologize to the victims. But it depends. Not a lot of people think this way, because in Morocco the king is like appreciated, and a lot of people, like the middle class and even
all Moroccans think that it's not the fault of the king, it's the fault of his entourage, you know, like the royal cabinet and like his really, really close people. And that's the way it is for 15 years now. Every time there is a problem, it's not his fault, it's his entourage. And even that, he made like a communique where he said that he didn't know about it. And they pointed out a responsible. I think he lost his job or something. And I think people think that he didn't know. Like they criticize him, but in the same time they say, okay, it's not his fault.
Another tweet coming in from someone calling themselves Misanthropy. Morocco's king deserves absolutely no credit for revoking his royal paedophile pardon. Moroccans on the street do deserve credit for what they're doing. There we go. Let's bring in Michael Kirtley. Michael, in layman's terms, this is a complete mess, isn't it?
Well, I think that what needs to be understood, first of all, is the strong relationship that's always existed between the king and even the office of the king and the people of Morocco. I mean, there's a feeling that the king will protect you. This feeling may be, caused by a certain number of factors, but certainly the king, this particular king, especially Mohammed VI, has often been out among the population. He's shown that he's trying to listen to the people, and he's actually done quite a few things in favor of children in Morocco. So in terms of finding out who's responsible, obviously most people want to blame the king, and most people are thinking along those terms. But I think looking logically, you have to think about the situation. This guy, Daniel Galvan, there was a very public trial in 2011 where it was almost a media circus around what he was condemned to the largest term in prison that any such prisoner has ever been condemned to in Morocco. It's pretty unthinkable that if the king had known that his name was on the list and who he was, that he would have released him, because it's very predictable that this sort of reaction would have taken place. So I'm on the side that tends to believe that the king wasn't aware that this particular person was on that list. Now, why did that happen? I mean, that's a very important question. And what does it mean? What's happened since then? Those are both very important questions. I think that the why it happened is related to a number of things. First of all, King Juan Carlos was in Morocco just 10 days ago. This was very highly celebrated inside of Morocco, and there was certainly a desire on the part of certain Moroccan officials to please the king and the king of Spain. I mean, to please because this rapprochement that existed just recently against Morocco, between Morocco and Spain, was very highly celebrated inside Morocco, and there were only 10 days that were going on in between those times. So it's very possible. There are two theses that are very possible. The first is that it was a plot of some sort to embarrass the king, on somebody's part. The second thesis is that it was a really stupid mistake in an effort to somehow, in an excess of zeal, to please the Spaniards. Now, when the list arrived on the king's desk, is a list of about 1,000 people. There were about, I think, 40 people from Spain, and how many?
48.
48 people from Spain. It's unthinkable to me that the king knowingly would release a pedophile.
Let me bring in another tweet coming in from Marwan Atlas. The symptoms, the infirmity, unlimited monarchy, the antidote, constitutional monarchy, calling for some kind of reform there of the role of the king. Good luck with that one, people might say. In terms of what went wrong, let's bring Ida in again.
I think what this really sheds a light on is that in Morocco there's an elected government, and then there are the king's advisors, who are extremely powerful, who were not elected, and who there's absolutely no transparency about what they're involved in, what they do, and even today, I mean, the king withdrew his pardon, fine, but we don't know who in his cabinet is responsible. When in any democracy in the world, there would be a name. We would know.
You sacked the prisons minister, but
yeah,
you think that's just window dressing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who would believe that this person is responsible for absolutely everything. And this is the time for these advisors to be held accountable at some point for their actions. I mean, there's this government who we know doesn't have as much power as the advisors, and citizens, Moroccan citizens, they don't know what's going on.
Who are these people then? These people,
The advisors?
this state within a state. It sounds like you're talking about this.
We call it the parallel
His
government.
friends.
The parallel government. It's a good
Yes.
expression. Who
Yeah,
are
it's
they?
his
Who are they?
friends. It's like his long-time friends, like they went with him at school, and it's his really entourage from like his adolescence or
So
something.
it's his old school buddies.
Yeah, exactly,
It
BFF.
sounds like something you get in a kind of strange public school street on television, doesn't it? It's really weird.
I know, it was exactly like this.
Okay, let's bring in our guest in Casablanca, Driss Aliou Madagri, who's joining us on Skype. Sarah, I hope you can hear us. I hope you followed a little bit of what we've been saying here in the studio. Can I get your opinion on this idea that the King of Morocco is surrounded by a group of advisors who, in effect, are making the decisions, taking the decisions, and perhaps might be to blame for this mess that the King and the country finds itself in at the moment? Making the decisions, taking the decisions, perhaps might be to blame for this mess that the King and the country finds itself in at the moment.
Well, certainly there are people who are to be blamed.
Taking the decisions, perhaps might be to blame for this mess that the King. Okay, we will come back to you, Driss, when we've worked out what's happening with the sound. It's kind of entertaining on one level and very frustrating on another. So we'll try to sort that out and come back to you as soon as we possibly can. Let's bring in Michael Kirtley, who I see as the voice of reason on this story. In terms of a state within a state,
reasonable here.
in terms of a state within a state, I mean, clearly that sets a very worrying precedent, does it not? That you have this group of unelected, unaccountable advisors who maybe are taking decisions that perhaps they shouldn't be.
And the protesters, beginning in 2011, very much were targeting that state within a state. I mean, much less so than the king himself. They were targeting the way that the royal palace was run and the way that the government was run in general. Since the election of the Islamists, the PJD party, a year or so ago, the perception in Morocco is that this is increased because there are more of the former ministers that have now become part of the royal cabinet. And so on that level, there's a perception that this government within a government has become even more powerful than before. On the other hand, at that same time, there was this reform of the constitution that the king promulgated right after the different demonstrations that took place in 2011, in the same wake of the Arab Spring that took place in other countries. And I think that in terms of that secondary power, there's no doubt that the perception is that those people wield too much power too secretively. And if that's going to continue, we'll see it in the near future because the king is going to have to make a declaration about how this all happened.
We've had a tweet kind of on that issue from Kehoroto. I hope that's the correct pronunciation, but obviously you pay your money, you take your choice. Thank you. The revocation by the king is just another dodged bullet for the fear of an Arab Spring in Morocco. You mentioned something that there have been, of course, changes with the February the 20th movement back in the Arab Spring era, of course, concessions such as the constitution and the prime minister taking charge of his own cabinet.
But like you have to know that the constitution was a response. The constitution, sorry, was a response to the contestation, but it happened in a good time. Like it has a good timing because it was the rising like Arab Springs in Egypt and Tunisia. It was like chaos, and people are just afraid to live the same thing because they see that on TV and on the news. So this constitution, this reform happened like well played, okay, we are going to reform the constitution, so we don't need a revolution. It was the same for the Islamists. Okay, we're gonna make governments, we will have the Islamists without going by revolution. But I think today everyone knows that the real man like in charge is the king, because even when you have governmental crisis, for example, the politics on TV, they say, we can't say nothing, we wait for the king. We can't say nothing, we wait for the king. So it's just, for me, it's just, a show, like a puppet show or something. And the king is the real man in charge.
Because the popular perception from people like in my role, in my life, in my sort of job, I suppose, is that the Arab Spring happened in the other countries and very little changed in Morocco. That's the perception from outside. But you're saying that it is different, Ida.
I was saying it was different in the sense that the people who went out this weekend on Friday and last night and who are going out tonight are not people who protested 2 years ago. I mean, I know mothers and fathers with their children who went out this weekend and last night. And that's why I said something changed. Not that the country. That's what I meant.
Even though
by
there are not
change.
a lot of people who went out for this,
Here's another tweet. Stondalien sending in this tweet. The people's voice has been heard for once in Morocco, but we must turn to a constitutional monarchy. That coming up again, constitutional monarchy. Reducing the king's powers, I presume, is what they're saying. Creating something like what they have in the United Kingdom, where I grew up.
Like what we've got here with this affair is that the king is ready to negotiate. Like when you put pressure on him, he can like sit on the table and say, okay, that's a good point, you know, but that's it.
We're going to try to bring in the former Minister of Communication in the Moroccan government, Driss Alaoui Dagri, who is joining us by phone. Sorry about the Skype link not working, Driss, but I hope you can hear us. I hope you followed a little bit of what's been said here on the debate. Can I put the question to you that I was trying to put to you before about this idea of a state within a state? Is the king fully aware of what's going on? Are there people around him who are making bad decisions?
Well, I think that the king, as any ruler and any politician, makes the assessment of what is happening in the country he rules or he governs. You cannot be the decision maker in a country, whatever its type is, and its system without hearing what is said by people in the streets. That is something important. And certainly the king is aware of a number of shortbacks in the functioning of the system. And each time he tries to address this situation, the issue, that's what happened in the so-called Arab Spring with the reform of the Constitution. And today, there is a clarification after what happened with this pardon, which was indeed absurd and unacceptable. And therefore, the capacity of the system to correct and to adjust to the new situation is, in my view, a good sign. It shows from one hand that the civil society is active, it is not ready to accept anything anymore, and at the same time it shows that the system and the rulers are hearing what is said. Now, will that play in the reform, the structural reforms of the system? That's something which certainly would have its impact. It is the intelligence of the decision makers to understand that it is time for clarifications of the role of each one, whether the government, the king, and the cabinet, the royal cabinet, and the administrative bureaucracy. I think that time has come for some clarification of the role of each one.
But the king, essentially, as far as you're concerned, remaining in place and keeping that power. Driss, we'll talk more about that in part two. We've had a lively first half and obviously discussing more about Morocco, the king, the paedophile and the people in part two of our debate, which is coming up very shortly. Stay with us.